won several awards, including the prestigious Padma Shri for journalism in 2008. He has been the News Anchor of the Year at the Indian Television Academy a record 10 times. In 2020, he has conferred with the Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual News Broadcasting Awards. His book 2019, How Modi Won India, is a national bestseller, as was his previous book, 2014, The Election That Changed India. A cricket blue at Oxford, his book, Democracy's 11, The Great Story of Indian Cricket, was shortlisted by MCC Lords as Cricket Book of the Year in 2017-18. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this eminent personality with a round of applause. Welcome. Moving on. The voice of Indian sports, Mr. Charu Sharma, began his sportscasting career at the 9th Asian Games. He went on to become India's most respected multi-sport television commentator and anchor. Kabaddi, which was a popular sport only in the hinterland of India today, is the second most watched sport on Indian television, thanks to Mr. Charu Sharma. Through martial sports, he conceptualized, founded, and conducted India's biggest and most successful sporting revolution, the Pro Kabaddi League. The inaugural edition of 2014 PKL was a huge success. Not only did it succeed where it was supposed to, but also in the urban scenarios. If Kabaddi is an upmarket and aspirational sports today, it is kudos to Charu Sharma. Dear audience, please put your hands once again to welcome this dynamic personality. Thank you all. Thank you, and wish you an exciting session, and wish you all an enjoyable session, dear audience. Thank you.
That's just to check the audio. Seems we're okay, but I don't know whether we're given 1 hour from now or 25 minutes, 35 minutes from now. So will somebody please clarify, because it was supposed to be 3 to 4. And if nobody will, I'll presume it's 1 hour. Well, thank you very much. Rajdeep, great to have you here. Before we move on, of course, this is like live now, somebody's recording it as well. So what he has promised me is a copy of his book. Thank you very much. Yes? Okay. You can sign it later. That's a good start. Okay, it does say Democracy is 11 on our topic this afternoon, and for no good reason I'm beginning, because we were both wondering who's going to begin. I said, what the hell, time's short. In fact, my wife has a little mug presented to me on one of my birthdays which says, time is short. I don't know why I say it all the time. But you've written a book on Democracy is 11, so obviously you're very deeply seeped into this whole theory of cricket being democratic. In the past, it used to be, and of course, we had this wonderful Sufi sign earlier on. It was like cricket and democracy, but that's kind of wide now. It's almost the same. We've gotten to a very democratic situation. Rajdeep, since you dived deep into it, and by the way, I was a diver, so I love that little phrase. Go right ahead. I've got only about 629 things to share with everybody here. I may not have the time, but if you're a little more focused, maybe you can kick it all off.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Charu. First of all, thank you very much for having me in the wonderful city of Mysuru. I genuinely mean it out of, when I travel across the country and I try and spend weekends to get out of the noxious air of Delhi and to find oxygen elsewhere, Mysuru would be in the top 10 cities that I would travel to. And I've come here before, and we can go into those connections later. The great spinner Prasanna used to come from here, and whenever Prasanna came to Mumbai, he would give my father a box of Mysore Pak. I think it was his way of trying to ensure that my father slowed down when he played the game. Because after you've had a box of Mysore Pak, there's very little chance of you then going on the field and playing. But my father always remembered that through all the 15 years that he played the Ranji Trophy, They never lost to anyone, including to then Mysore, as it was called. The year he retired, 1973, was the next year Karnataka beat Bombay, now known as Mumbai. But when he was there, and there's this great story which is in the book, semi-finals 1966-67, Mysore, as it was then called, was playing Bombay in Bombay, and Mysore batted and scored 325 runs. And Chinnaswamy, after whom your stadium in Bengaluru is named, flew down the entire officials of the Karnataka State Cricket Association because they thought they were finally beating the great Mumbai side. They all flew back the next day because Bombay was 325 for 1 wicket. And the theory was that Ajit Wadekar would bat against Chandrasekhar and my father would play Prasanna. And so they claim, of course, after a few drinks, that they simply would destroy Chandra and Prasanna. So they said that, but there were deep links and great fondness that they all had for each other, to the point where in 1971, the famous day when Chandrasekhar created history with 6 wickets that one afternoon to defeat England for the first time. The day before that, there used to be a rest day in cricket. My father and Chandrasekhar had gone to watch the derby, the Epsom derby, or whichever was the big race in England at the time. And the horse that won the race was a horse called Mildred. And the next day, when Chandra was bowling, my father, who had to be protected because he wasn't a great fielder, and so neither was Chandra. So they were at mid-off to each other. And last ball before lunch, my father tells Chandra, bowl him a Mildred, which became a sort of name for Chandra's famous googly. And to those who think that Chandra didn't know what he was bowling, that's an absolute lie. He exactly knew. The batsman didn't know what Chandra was bowling, which is a different story. And he bowled a Mildred, gets Edridge out, and the rest is history. And so we have, I mean, my old man had deep affection for this part of the world. And as I've always said, I think you get the warmest people as you come deeper down south. It is true. It is true. I don't say it. You just have to go through the list of the cricketers from Dravid onwards. And they just seem warmer, more affectionate, and more self-effacing. I haven't seen a more self-effacing cricketer, Charu, than the great Vishwanath, for example. I mean, I was shooting this elections on my plate many years ago, and I tried to tempt him. Actually, while writing this book, I had to go and interview him, and he was unwell. He'd just come out of hospital. And I said, sir, maybe we'll do it another time. He said, no, you've come all the way to Bengaluru. So I said, sir, but I'll come, if you feel on another time. He said, no, I will come and I will take you to my favorite table at the Bangalore Golf Club. And so, sure enough, self-driven, came at 7:30 in the evening. Of course, the evening then went on till late when you're with Vishwanath. But he was this most wonderful, self-effacing man. And I wish today's cricketers would have even a fraction of that humility which the great cricketers had of the past. I think they were just, I think when you're paid 250 rupees a test match, and I write about this story in the book, you're paid 250 rupees a test match in the 1960s, and India defeats New Zealand in 4 days, and the board cuts 50 rupees. Because apparently they were dihadis or day laborers who were paid, and this was in a test match. Or indeed, as I also write in the book, the great team of 1956, with Mankad and Umrigar and all these great names of that period, they win a test match again a few days, before it's over. And at the last minute, they have to book a train to come back. I mean, there was no air travel for them. They had to come back by train. But they had no pocket money. Their pocket allowance hadn't been given. So the last minute, a board official comes to the station, and they're sitting on the station, and he's counting the 2 rupee notes which he's giving these great players. When you look at that, and you look at where we are today with the IPL, which you auctioned, Charu, so wonderfully, look at where the world is. 2 rupee allowances being given to the likes of Umrigar and Mankad on a railway station platform when they were playing for India versus the millions that you have. So that's, and in a way, this book is trying to sort of reflect on where we have come. And it's a great Indian story because, I write and I cover politics on a day-to-day basis, and politics depresses me. and cricket makes me smile, as it does. So, I mean, that's the reason, in a way, I wrote this, and partly I wrote this to try and understand something that I've never understood, that a politician's son or daughter can easily become a politician. And there are lots of examples of that all around us, without necessarily having the skills or the talent. But a cricketer's son or daughter now can never play for India because, as my late father would tell me, I can't go on the crease and make the runs for you. And, I always thought that, it would be the natural thing to do. And the story really stemmed, and my decision to write this book stemmed from there, that my father was, at the end of the day, the only Goa-born cricketer till date to have played for India. And that was 1940 born, when Goa was ruled by the Portuguese. He never saw a turf wicket till the age of 17, 1957. It was the first time he came to Mumbai on a work permit, because in those days, if you lived in Goa, Goa was still Portuguese rule. You needed a work permit to come. Till the age of 17, he was tutored by the village tailor. Madgaon was basically a village town at the time. They now call themselves, even Goa now sees that they are cities. But, he was taught by the village tailor, who in turn had learned cricket listening to radio commentary. Now, I sometimes wonder, in this age where everything is on computer and television, everything is live, how did they actually learn the game? There was no cricket ground in Goa. There was one railway track. And it was just next to that railway track was a small ground, or what passes off as a ground. And there in the 1940s and 50s, and not just my father, there were many others who perhaps dreamt to play for India, had no godfather, no mentor, no cricket equipment to speak of. And yet, 57 comes to Mumbai, by 61 is playing for India, 4 years after, at the age of 21. And and my father would always say this, I who had all the cricket coaching and the equipment and everything else and the surname, was not good enough. And so once I asked him this, and he said, there are two things. One is, you've got to have fire in the belly. I had it because if I didn't do this, there was nothing else that was there for me. And number two, and he looked up to the skies and said, sometimes they bless you with talent. And I've always said this again, that if you are untalented and have no talent, there's always one profession for you, which is journalism. And therefore, having discovered at the age of 21, and that's where the book starts, I'm playing this match for Oxford University against combined universities, combined British universities against Imran Khan's Pakistan in 1987. And my being in the team reflected more on the poor quality of British cricket than on any talent that I had. And there I am playing the great Abdul Qadir, who I had only seen on TV till then. And I go to bat and I get out with in the first 6 balls, I don't think I touched one ball that he bowled. I was bowled for 1. And as I'm leaving the ground, Salim Malik, who Krishna Prasad today showed me a lovely bat that he has of him, looks at me and says, Yaar, tu India se aata and you can't even play spin bowling. And I looked at him and I said, here I am, 21, 22 already, struggling to sort of think that cricket could be my future, and realizing that if you don't have that God-given talent or don't have the fire in the belly, you're not going to make it. So in a meritocratic India, which increasingly, I believe, cannot be run through family-run legacies, cricket offers hope. Sports and science, in a way, offer that kind of unique position where it doesn't matter where you come from. Our scientists and our sports persons, in that sense, are emblematic, I believe, of a real new India. Our politics is not. Our politics still is trapped in feudalism, where the sons and daughters of politicians, including in the BJP, which will tell you that other parties have dynasties. Your state, Mr. Yediyurappa and family are still around from when I last saw. They've not entirely gone. And there will be many others, because politics allows you that privilege, business allows you that privilege, sports doesn't. Sports is, in that sense, I guess, not so much democratic, but certainly truly meritocratic. And that's where this book stemmed from, that these stories need to be told. And frankly, since I've written it 4 years ago, just look at these stories, and I'll leave you with that thought as a point. there is this wonderful story that I just read about a month and a half ago, and then I went and met that boy. There is this young boy, Kartikeya Singh, who at the age of 14 left his home in UP because he said, I want to be a cricketer. Came to Delhi with virtually, his father is a constable in UP. Stayed in a place with 10 others, in a dormitory-like place. Worked as a night laborer because he wanted to live in the city. Would drive, or would take a bus rather, all the way from Ghaziabad to Delhi for practice. His coach found out that he often came to practice without having had breakfast. Finally got him a place where he could at least have some lunch. And eventually moved to Madhya Pradesh. This year, last month, he just won the Ranji Trophy for Madhya Pradesh with his bowling, played for the Mumbai Indians, and in his first match was man of the match. And, you know, it is a story which I think is going to be replicated again and again. I think the next generation cricketers will come from Tier 2 towns, and they're all coming from there because they have the fire in the belly. My father came from Madgaon, one-horse town in the 1940s. Kartikeya comes from Jhansi, which again, he wouldn't want it to be called a one-horse town, but it is a small town. But they come with the fire in the belly. And I think cricket gives you that great opportunity in a way to celebrate what India can offer if you provide every Indian equal opportunity. I mean, you know, to me, I think that is the future of real new India. When you can provide equal opportunity, that's when you've really built a truly meritocratic society. So that's where the book idea came. It also allowed me a break from writing my political books, where every time I write a page, I wonder who's going to file a defamation suit. And when I'm writing on cricket, I have a smile on my face and I know no one's going to file a defamation suit. Sorry for that long
Oh, hey, wonderful stories. Yeah, I'm here to listen. By the way, I've always thought I make a better listener than a speaker, but that's... and I'd love to also say, and where do you learn all these things? I say I learn these things from keeping my ears and eyes open. But then I say I can't keep my mouth shut, so because I'll have no living. So, but yeah, you know, from whatever you said, if I was just to pick up on that, I have already about 75 points. Maybe you have another 75, so that makes 150 and we have no time. But for starters, I just want to let you know that your comments about Mysore were fabulous. And the other side of the story is what you don't know, is that they respected Rajdeep Sardesai so much. Till it was Mysore state, they said, nahi, arun ko nahi harana. The next year, became Bangalore, beat Bombay, got the Ranji Trophy. That's a long story. So just a little payback. But there's no question that, oh, there's so much about sport. You know, we could be here all day, all night, till whenever you're here. But truly, this whole fire in the belly thing is very important. And of course, we generalize now. There can be people from the wealthiest of families living in the biggest of homes, and that person too could, a son or a daughter, be a sporting star. But the kind of, and this is probably true for most professions, but so I'm not isolating sport or cricket, but the kind of hard work that it takes, the kind of blood, sweat, and tear it takes, a lot of elite urban youngsters, somewhere along the way say, is it really worth it? Because the pyramid in sport is very, very steep. So if you have a wide base of, I don't know, 1 million people, and in cricket, of course, the problem now is that there are 10 million people. And you have to be a Kartikeya Sharma, which is about 1 in, say, 20 or 1 in 50, 1 in 200, out of millions who are playing the game. And so any sensible elite urban youngster says, well, I don't think the percentage is with me, and there's so many other things I can do. Why must I go and kill myself in a sporting field with a chance of maybe 1 in a million of making it to the top? Percentages are not good. In tier 2, 3, 4, 5, one-horse towns, whatever, that's where the hunger truly is, because you feel, well, if I'm not going to make it to the top in cricket or any other sport, that's okay, because I'm not really coming from any privilege anyway. So it's not going to be a big fall from grace that I've worked so hard for the last 10 years and I've achieved nothing. The truth is that in an elite urban situation, you could be sort of very far away from what you could have been had you spent 10 years in sport and not made it. But in these other towns, it's your one big escape. It's the big tunnel out into this sunshine. And so this dichotomy in Indian sport is getting more and more visible, where And this is a real worry for all people who play sport or who wish to send their children to sport or whatever. But I'm glad more and more people are. That those who can most afford to play and pay, in a sense, have the least fire. And the ones who have that, what's the word for big fire? Ones who have the most raging fire are the ones who can generally not afford anything. So this bridge is this gap is very difficult to bridge. Now, people keep saying in India, and we have this very, famous lean on the government saying, government ko kuch karna chahiye. And I have cried from every rooftop, shouted, that the government has 500 other priorities. And in their minds, they're all more important than sport, much as I would like to disagree. You see, you go to the finance ministry or any other, ministry that gives out money, and there are files lying from here to there, and there's disaster all over the country, and funds are needed for floods and for fires and for drought and for rain and for everything else. And then you go in and say, can I have a little money to play a sport? And the guy looks at you and says, can you imagine his mind saying, you want to play sport when millions are needed for some rescue operation somewhere or whatever? So it's a very difficult situation that we find ourselves. And yet, I keep saying that our glass is half full, and drop by drop it's being added to every day because there's new infrastructure, there's new support, there's new people coming in. And I don't want to be uncharitable, but I think the private or corporate world, which is where the support must come from because the government has serious limitation, has probably done about, I'm just throwing this figure out, 3%. So 97% is still to come. Those who are becoming more prosperous, those who are running prosperous industries and whatever else, need to realize, and I keep being told, don't give me this mother speech, in that, it's so easy, you live in a utopian world, but the funds must come from the prosperous corporate world into sport, because sport, and I'm sorry, I'm not going on cricket and democracy right here, but it's all related. And one of my favorite lectures is everything matters, because everything is related. But sport, like almost nothing else, maybe I shouldn't say this at this gathering, maybe like authors, safe thing to say here, really elevates a country. The international reputation, people call it what, soft power now? So the whole soft power thing is massive for sport because, and I again give my favorite example, and then it'll be Rajdeep's turn to speak, and so we'll do this little, partnership thing all afternoon. It's a standard one, so if you've read this on the net or whatever, I do beg your pardon. But I'm sure most of you realize that this wonderful country, small one, in the West Indies, loosely speaking, in the Caribbean, Jamaica, right? Most of us have heard about Jamaica. And it's run, because it's a country, it needs to run, it has, so many things to, so many responsibilities. And the one most, perhaps the second most powerful gentleman in, or could have been a lady, but a gentleman or lady in Jamaica, the one who is responsible for making sure that country develops and grows and prospers is the finance minister. And I'm sure at least 10 of you here, please raise your hand and tell me that you know the name of the finance minister of Jamaica. Come on. Right. However, there's somebody who won medal after medal as the fastest man on earth. Can I hear a name? Such is the power of sport.
You're right, but let me put it this way. Let me take this. You're right. It is soft power, but I just want to build again on this fire in the belly point, because I think we need to. And I've tried really to tell the stories of these people, and I was privileged that they all sort of opened up. Some of them are no longer with us, the likes of Mansoor Ali Khan Patodi, but MS Dhoni, who in a sense, to my mind, in a way typifies this rise of this new India, from a small town like Ranchi again. And there's this wonderful thing, it was tough to finally nail him down, but he eventually agreed to speak. MS Dhoni has this reputation that it's the last over of a match, 15 runs to get, Dhoni is completely calm, he's batting on the crease, and 9 times out of 10 he will win you the match. So I asked him this story, and I said, what is it that you're able to achieve this seemingly impossible whenever you go out to bat? And he told me something that has stood by me, which I've told my kids and everyone who I meet. He says, Rajdeep bhai, 2001 or 2002, I was a ticket collector at Kharagpur station. I had just got my first job in the railways. And my superior told me, whatever you do, don't allow anyone to travel without ticket. And he said, Rajdeep bhai, when the train used to come to Kharagpur from Kolkata with all these excitable Bengalis, rushing into the train and in and out of the train, I was at a loss. My wife is Bengali, so I'm emphasizing excitable Bengalis. Rushing in and out. He said, the pressure that I was to ensure कि कोई ticket के बगैर नहीं जाएगा अंदर. He said, once you've dealt with that pressure, what is the fast bowler? And in a sense, in what he said was a secret to success of keeping it simple and living in the moment. He said, when I was in 2001-2, if you would ask me one day, barely 9 years later, you will be there in the Wankhede Stadium lifting this World Cup as the most decorated or certainly the wealthiest cricketer of your time. He said, sir, I didn't think about 2011 when I was in 2002. In 2002, I was only dealing with one thing, which is how do I ensure that no one travels ticketless. In 2011, when that final came, and I had a choice to go out to bat, and it's there in his movie also, I said, pressure? What pressure? Because I think somewhere I lived in that moment. I just wanted that day in 2011 to take India to victory. Like in 2002, I wanted to ensure no one was ticketless. And I think that's where many of these small town hero stories come, because they come from places in a way wherein life is a real battle at times where you live in the moment. The privilege isn't there, the elite privilege. It doesn't mean that you can't be elite, you can't come from the big city and make it big. And there are stories of the likes of Rahul Dravid, who is the one Kannadiga in the book featured. The choice was between Dravid and Kumble, and I chose Dravid perhaps ahead of Kumble at the time, which on hindsight could have easily been reversed. But Virat Kohli, comes from, in a way, West Delhi. And there is this remarkable story again that Kohli tells me, which, is, again, gives you sort of goosebumps, that here is this young boy at the age of 16 or 17 playing for Delhi in his first year, is 70 not out in his debut match, and his father passes away that night. And the choice he has is, do I go back and play the match, or do I go to my father's funeral? He goes and plays the match, and the father's funeral takes place at 3 p.m. He gets out for 95. He insists that he was not out. Kohli is never out in Kohli's own imagination, then and now. But here is this young boy, at the age of 17, playing for his city for the first time. Father passes away that night. His father, who had really literally taken him from ground to ground. And he goes the next day, plays the match, and then goes to the father's funeral. And then you realize where maybe even Kohli's sheer determination comes from. That if you can take that kind of loss at that kind of age, you have to have something special. So I think you don't need government, therefore. The good thing actually is there's less government in sport. We need, today when you see the Neeraj Chopras and all of the world, and surely the Kabaddi players that you deal with, many of them have again come from these smaller towns. And they built, I think when you build your life on your own without needing any support, it gives you a certain self-confidence. And I think the likes of the Jindal group and others who have supported Neeraj Chopra have, in a way, been enablers, in a way that the government would never have been. Government would have said, please fill form in triplicate. As the BCCI also would do. The BCCI till the IPL happened. And, Lalit Modi is right in a way. That had he not been around, the old style BCCI would have never conceptualized the IPL. Because they would have tried to see, isme mere ko kitna fayda hoga. What will I get out of the system, not what will the players get out of the system. The story is replete with these books, with these stories of these players not sure, do they go to the BCCI and ask, for example, for an allowance for laundry? One of the reasons that cricketers, one of them at least tells me in the 1960s, would not dive on a cricket field because they were worried, particularly abroad, if their pants got dirty, the laundry allowance, who was going to deal with the laundry allowance? Because they didn't even get a proper laundry allowance. From there to where we've come across sports. And credit to you for what you've done to Kabaddi, because it's, become another great aspirational sport again for a new India. I mean, these are the stories of hope that I think inspire a million, really trigger a million dreams. So I'm not so sure about government, Charu, playing a role. I think parents, schools, the environment in which which is being now created is actually igniting these dreams. Every district, I'm told, I know in Karnataka, Mr. Kumble told me, has a turf ground today. And that's why Karnataka is marching ahead in many ways, in cricket and in other sports. Once you can create that infrastructure, then I don't need to come from Ranchi to Kolkata, or I don't need to come from Goa to Mumbai like my father had to play this game. You can do it in your hometown. But it is a fascinating sort of reality of India, these small town heroes who are changing and transforming this game.
Yeah, so there's just a little addition to that, in that it's great to have facilities in smaller towns, districts, wherever, Mufassal, as we call it, Mufassal. But that's only to ensure that, unlike your father, that you don't get into a turf wicket at the age of 17 for the first time.
Sure.
The facilities are created so you can get used to the best, or at least a certain higher level of facility, so that you don't yearn for that basic, simple facility and therefore have to go to a big city. Sadly, though, the bigger tournaments are held in the bigger cities. That's how it is. So you do have to gravitate towards bigger cities, but not as a complete, I shouldn't use a derogatory term, but not as somebody who has been completely unexposed to better facilities or better equipment. The more that's prevalent in smaller towns, the more you're used to it. And if you translate that or transpose that all the way to the international level, the national level, one of the many reasons the Indian cricket team and many other Indians and many other sports are doing well is because of the much higher level of exposure, which in the past was also an economic thing. You couldn't go and compete in many countries over many years because you didn't have the funds. Now people do. In cricket particularly, there's India A, India B, India A, B, C, D, F, G, H, there are many teams, and they go to many countries and play mud sport. And which is why when you finally pitchforked into the national team or into some kind of eminence, it's all old hat. You've been there, you've done that, you're used to the people, you're used to the food, you're used to the environment and the culture and everything else. And so that higher level of exposure is one of the biggest reasons that the Indian team is doing well. Of course, there are many other reasons, but we can talk about that later. May not have to do with democracy, but do we have to stay with democracy really, or can we move on?
No, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's important to stay with democracy.
Okay, sorry.
And maybe, the fact is that increasingly politics is about vote banks. A lot of politics, they'll tell you that they're not, particularly in North India, I've learned over the last 25 years all the various castes and subcastes. Within Dalits, I didn't know till the longest time how many subcastes that existed. Or within Brahmins, there were various subcastes in different parts of UP. But on the cricket field, when an Umesh Yadav is bowling from one side and then, let's say, Mohammad Shami on the other, you genuinely don't see them as Yadavs and Muslims. And to my mind, that is great. When an Umran Malik today, the new young find of Indian cricket comes from Jammu, I think it gives the people of Jammu a sense of belonging much more than what our politicians can ever achieve. Our politicians have gone and split the state. It reduced the state to a union territory and got away with it. I'm sorry to make a political point here, but that is the reality. So I can meet a lot of Kashmiris who will feel angry and resentful today at that. And then you talk to them about Umran Malik and they feel good. Son of a fruit seller, with not a hope in hell, is given a break through these camps that are starting off. And suddenly you feel, that he feels part of a sort of wider world, and every Muslim today in Jammu feels proud of an Umran Malik. And yet on TV we will only, we will play this sort of terrible, noxious agenda. Yaar, Muslim hoga na, oh, from Jammu, usko rent bhi nahi denge ghar. The fact is, that's the reality. In a place like Delhi, people who come from Jammu and Kashmir find it difficult to rent a house in certain areas of the city. Now, if Umran Malik came, would you rent your house? Maybe you would. And that's why I believe these stories must be told, because they must become inspirational stories. There are stories of hope. We tend to focus too often, particularly in journalism, on the glass half empty. I'm as guilty as anyone. We look for the negatives. What's terrible about India? And rarely bring stories of hope. But this is, to my mind, I still maintain the greatest country in the world. Because from where people come and make this journey, I don't think, except for United States in the early 20th century, people made, this is the most aspirational society in the world. People will break doors today. My driver's son, is today an engineer in 25 years, because I somehow managed to get a favor out of Arjun Singh, the then HRD minister, to get him into Kendriya Vidyalaya. And that's made him a computer engineer. And that's the story across our lives you're going to find. These boys and girls coming and breaking these doors. And I think these stories need to be told for people to realize what the true Indian spirit is. The true Indian spirit is not represented by our politicians. I maintain that. They can give their stories where they've come from, and those are great stories. Draupadi Murmu coming from where she is, our new president, is a remarkable Indian story again. But there it's the exception. In sports, I believe it'll be the rule. And therefore, I believe it's, therefore, I'm hanging on to the word democracy, not for any other reason. I want this audience to go back charged, feeling that we belong to a great, unique country where there are lots of hopeful stories of transforming this country into a better place.
Soon there's going to be a movie made on Umran Malik. And in the movie, there are going to be some dialogues, and there's going to be a scene where he comes in and sees this big mansion. And he says, "Kitna chahiye?" And he pays X crores, and the guy says, "Umran sahab, aap burana mane to aapne mujhe lagta hai ki zarurat se zyada de diye." And Umran will turn around and say, "Agar aap burana mane, zarurat se bahut kam diye maine." Because my father used to sell fruits here or whatever. But no, they're all doing very well. And these IPL stories, of course, there'll be a million of. And I don't know whether we have time. Somebody had a timer here, and we were talking about timings earlier on. We see no timer, so that's good news. Okay, thank you. So far, so good. It's been 35 minutes. I've been keeping a track. But the IPL and other such leagues, I don't know whether to move along or not, but should we stay on? Okay, here's a little rocket that I'm going to send up. We can talk about it, and of course, maybe I'll give you some fodder as well later if we go to have a Q&A. This whole business of democracy also is hugely reflected in the concept of captaincy in cricket. Now, we've been talking about many things and getting a little sort of more granular here. I've learned a few jargon, a little bit of jargon as well, granular, deeper. And in the past, it used to be the captain was generally, and I'm talking about, say, of course, the sport came to us from the Brits, and they carried their own class systems and what have you. So there was no democracy then too, because the concept of captaincy in cricket, and I'm hesitating because I know that there are many people of many generations here, and it's going to take a little bit of letting go to just think about these things, was somebody who was the best, highest bred. Because in 1890, 70, whatever, 1912, the captain was cut from a different cloth, from a certain college in the UK, or set of colleges or university, if you don't mind. Yeah, so because the captain had much more this, supposedly, than others. Also because it was required for manners and behavior, and the captain would introduce the team to the queen and say all the right things and have a very stiff upper lip and so on and so forth. Not necessarily the best cricketer in the team. Maybe that was the call of the time, but things have changed. And even as they change within the sport, somehow the fans and the people who watch and love the sport are a little slower to understand why, what's going on in the sport. Because we keep saying, so-and-so, will he make a good captain? So-and-so will make a good captain. And it's one of my most abiding hypotheses. I hesitate to call it a theory. I've actually said this only a million times. So if you haven't heard it before, now's the time. That the importance or efficacy of a captain on the cricket field is inversely proportional to the seniority of a team. I'm going to let that seep in. If it's a school team, under 14, and you have some 19-year-old or PE coach or a senior cricketer captaining that team needs help. Those boys need help. And a senior man with a lot of experience, with perhaps a superior development in terms of cricket brain, is useful to say, listen, this is how it's going to happen. You go there and you do this. In a senior international team, everybody is a hard-boiled cricketer. Coming from, what town was it? Kartike? From Ujjain or Jhansi. And he's had this really, she has a very tough ride to make it to the Indian team. And they know every little thing there is to know about the game. And there are only 100 examples. I'm not a good chronicler. Someday I will be and I'll write a book. But I say this from experience that so many times midstream, mid-series, a captain changes. Somebody is unavailable, somebody is unwell, somebody rushes home for now. Of course, they rush home for the birth of a child or whatever. Somebody gets injured, and somebody else takes over. And if you, on balance, check the results of such situations, 7 times out of 10, majority, the new captain or the stand-in captain wins you more matches than the captain who's just gone. So I just want to let that out there, saying that we give still too much importance to who's the captain, what did the captain do, what did the captain say? Because on the cricket field, and I still play a bit, it's a think tank. It's the support staff, it's the coaches, it's the captain, it's the vice captain, senior players, anybody standing at slip, anyone. It's all 98% of the 95% of the decisions are collaborative. So what we say, terrible captaincy, we say very good captaincy, is only what individual brilliance has generally done. There are only very minimal incidences where the captain might have done something alone, individually, sole. And there's been a positive result. And one of the most glaring examples of this, of people who watch cricket and follow cricket and talk cricket, not quite grasping that the leader, the captain, really is just a reflection of everything around him, not individual. There's no tyranny anymore. There's no, you need to thinking about it. There's no single person decision. It's all collective. 1996-7 tour of South Africa. Sachin Tendulkar, the great, was the captain. Now, you all know what happened to Sachin. He was advised by various people, listen, let go of this captaincy. It's a bit of a burden. Focus on your batting. Make sure that that's what takes you ahead in the game. So he gave up his captaincy, but then he was captain then. And he said, okay, in one-day international in Par, there was a fine, very fit all-rounder in India. You might remember him, still the fielding coach of India, Robin Singh. So he said, Robin was an all-rounder, so number 6, number 7, ordinarily. He said, Robin, today's your day, pad up. Number 3, trying to do a Marguerite batch or whatever. Go early. Lefty, tonk, have a good time. Robin Singh went in there and scratch. I can't remember now. He got some 9 in 17 and got out. And people were like, what hopeless captaincy here. Kya captain here? Kyun kiya usne here? Because it didn't work. And of course, he left captaincy. Mohammad Azharuddin became the captain again back in 1999, I think it was. Maybe a match in Guwahati. Details I forget. Amongst many other things I forget. Guess what? The second time in his life, Robin Singh was told, pad up your number 3. He's a shore skipper. Went in there, got 100. People said, kya captaincy here? Kya captaincy here? Yeah. So, it's just what works, great. If it doesn't, let's stop this whole captain, my captain, which was very big till democracy kicked in. Now everybody knows everything there is to know. And this whole business of who should be next captain, KL Rahul, very smart. No, anybody smart. Generally speaking, we tend not to make fast bowlers captains, not because they are the less intelligent people in a cricket team, but it's torturous work. As a fast bowler, many fast bowlers here surely, it's hard work. And you go in there, and you're tired, and you get to final leg or third man, somebody's feeding you water. You don't want to think about who, what, where, next what. So they tend not to generally be made captains, which has a certain amount of physical sense to it.
No, that's true. Look, in the early years, Indian cricket was feudal. So when we first went to play a test match, it was to be the Maharaja of Patiala who was to captain. he didn't get it. Limdi was to be captain, who was a very good cricketer. But eventually, C.K. Naidu captained India for the first time. So I think, and Nawab Pataudi, when he became captain at the age of 21, was a very, very good cricketer. But as he tells me, he learned about India traveling with the other 10 players of Hyderabad on these train journeys. In those days, they did these long train journeys. And he said, I discovered India in a way. Because I had come from this elite background, I had gone to Oxford. I hadn't discovered India till I really was part of the Indian team. And I think in a sense, therefore, that's again, cricket tends to teach you whether you are a prince or a commoner. Once you're part of the team, then that team sport ethic, in a way, is also hugely democratizing. Because on the field, it doesn't matter whether you're a prince or a commoner. And I think that changed post-independence. If you look at pre-independence, that's why Mahatma Gandhi, in a sense, disliked the game to a large extent. Because in the 20s and 30s, we were dividing the sport on communal lines. You had the Hindus, the Muslims, the Parsis, all of whom had separate teams in the quadrangular, pentangular. You have the famous story that Ram Gua tells, which is partly in the book, about Paulankar Balu, who was a Dalit cricketer, the first great Dalit cricketer, who after he would take 5 or 6 wickets, could not be part of the celebrations with the rest of the dressing room because he would have to drink his tea in a separate teacup. From there to today, I mean, it's the journey of this country. This is a country which has made a huge journey. Paulankar Balu is the early 20th century. That's never going to happen today. Today, there are Dalit cricketers, but you're not going to identify and stamp them as Dalit cricketers. They are just there because of talent. And I think the important thing, Charu, in all of this, whether you're captain, whether you're commoner, do you have the talent and the skills? And I think one of the weaknesses in Indian society for the longest time is we didn't provide equal opportunity. We perhaps still don't. We talk about reservation. Why again, going to politics in this, I believe you need reservation till you can provide equal opportunity. Either you provide equal opportunity or you remain accepting of reservations as one way to try and ensure a level playing field. I mean, unless you can ensure a level playing field, how are you not going to endorse reservations? Controversial, I know. But on the cricket field, there are no reservations. The only place there is still reservations is in actually the officials. So you'll have Amit Shah's son possibly becoming the next board president. Now, that will possibly happen. But well.
Yeah. We're among friends.
Yeah. There's no one from the ED here. No enforcement directorate here. But that's the truth, right? The fact is, officials can often become officials because they are the sons and daughters of people in power. But it cannot happen on the field. And I think I keep harping on this, Charu. I think we need to recognize as Indians, how can we ensure every field of endeavor is built around equal opportunity?
Yeah, well, this was actually back in college, by the way. In one of the KTs, there was a comment which, I forget the philosopher, somebody with Z, who knows, but it was a famous comment by a philosopher, a phrase which I tend to remember. I remember very few things, so it's whatever I say is whatever comes out, because I tend not to remember stuff. But this one I do, because it suits me. He says, and that's in regard to politics, whereof I do not know, thereof I do not speak. So I have no clue about what's going on. I will make a plea to you, fervent plea, that I used to be a huge consumer of news in the evening. And I say this with genuine heart and comment. I listen to your shows. I listen to, at times, a certain channel based in a certain city in the north of India, 24/7 they call it. But 30 seconds of anything else, and it's so difficult to hold tea and dinner down. It's just sickening here. Can you do something about it, or are you what?
Charu, I didn't even want to talk about what TV news does. I often say you should watch TV news now only in 2 conditions. One, if you've got someone in your family who's suffering from low blood pressure and you need to increase the blood pressure. Number two, if you've got someone in the family deep in coma and you need to revive them. If you want to feel depressed at the end of the day, go to TV news. If you want free entertainment, go there. But I want to ask you one question before, just as sort of cricket discovered democracy, you did it through Kabaddi. I've often wondered, why did you choose Kabaddi as a sport that you believed would actually become this sort of national sport?
Well, thank you, Rajdeep. Can somebody please show me a 4-hour thing? We got 4 hours? 5 hours? Okay. If you don't have 5 hours, sorry, you got to feed me dinner for that one. But thank you for asking. I'd love to speak more about it because it took 4 years or more, actually 10 years of my life. But it's a long story, and it's best
10 years to conceptualize?
and it's best expressed in a book someday. I think I've got 2 or 3 books already in me. Maybe if I get less lazy than I am, I might actually write them. Yeah, it took a long time. The story started in 2006 when I went for the Asian Games to commentate, which is what I do. And I got this call from a +44, as in UK number. It says, "Is that Charu Sharma?" I said, "Yeah." And some of this is going to sound immodest. Bear with me. What can I say? And he said that, "Oh, great! I'm glad we're finally in touch." And I said, "Well, man, who's speaking or whatever, and people sort of be a little polite." And he said, "No, forget about all that. Tell me, are you a man?" I said, "What are you saying?" Just tell me, are you a man? He's a funny guy. And I said, "No, listen, I'd love to be, but I need to know what for." So he said, "Oh, all right, okay, I'm so glad I got in touch with you because, somehow it's very difficult and we don't have your number." But like I said, it sounds a little modest, but all roads seem to lead to you because we need now, for the Doha Asian Games, we need to do a world feed. World feed is a single point commentary, unfortunately or fortunately in English, which is done from the ground, from the stadium, from the court, by the host broadcaster. And then, of course, you can take that feed or you can take the pictures and do your own commentary in your own country, but these are all complicated things. And he said, we've been retained to do the Kabaddi commentary at the Asian Games for the first time, and we don't quite know who to get to. And, people say that you're the man. I'd never done Kabaddi commentary in my life, but I said, "Oh, yeah, you found your man." So he said, "Oh, I'm so happy, and, we'll send you a contract and so on and so forth." So I then went to many corners of many Kabaddi fields and sort of was reacquainted with the sport. And I realized, and in fact, Mandya was one of the first tournaments I went to. And I just realized that, yeah, thank you, Karnataka. And I realized just what an incredibly powerful sport it is in every possible way. Now, I mentioned earlier, whereof I do not know, thereof I do not speak, but what I do know of a little bit is television and sport. And I said, if this sport can be spruced up and shown well on television, it's just going to be fabulous. That's what I learned. I went to the Asian Games, and I, of course, did the commentary. Had to sound like I've been doing it for 25 years. But there was a lot of endorsement from other people. There's a huge media contingent at the Asian Games. They all came up and said, "Charu, tell us more. It's a fabulous sport. We can't seem to get a look in because it was the first sport that was sold out in Doha." And, so on and so forth. And I said, well, we've got to do something about it. So I got in touch with the Federation. That was 2006. It took me 4 years of trying to win their trust, which I sort of did, but nothing moved, not much anyway, despite my pushing. 2010, Guangzhou, again, the Asian Games, same people, same contract, same thing. And I said, enough is enough. So then I gave up whatever I was doing, which was a fair amount of commentary. I said no to every assignment. 90% of those people haven't called back. No, that's okay. And then I said, okay, let's push this fabulous prospect. And only because I knew that the minute it got onto television in the kind of avatar that I had thought of, it would be a fabulous hit. And all I can say to cut short this massive story, accordion it, is that on the 26th of July, 2014, we finally got the first day of the league up in Mumbai. And from that day onwards, it's become the second most watched sport in India. So, I mean...
So the moral of the story is, if you're on television, don't do news, do Kabaddi. Because instead of practicing Kabaddi in a television news studio, much better to have real players. But television in a way has transformed this, this democratization of sport. Because we grew up, or I grew up in the 70s on ball-by-ball commentary. Everybody would have a transistor radio. My father's, as I've told the story, his tailor learned the sport listening to radio commentary. 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, till the 82 Asian Games, and then it was all about radio. And it's incredible the number of Indians, and there is a generation here, who sort of grew up on sports and sporting heroes purely through radio. I mean, Bishan Singh Bedi tells me this lovely story in Amritsar, that he decided to become a cricketer when he heard of Subhash Gupte taking 9 wickets against West Indies in 1958. So I said, but you heard him. हाँ बेटे मैंने सुना, and सुनकर मुझे लगा कि मुझे भी cricketer होना है. Now you've got people actually being able to watch. So MS Dhoni watched Sachin Tendulkar in a village, in a small house in Ranchi, and decided to become a cricketer. This is a very privileged, lucky generation in that sense. But the power of radio was, is remarkable in the way it unites a nation, just as the power of TV. So don't watch news on TV.
What sport?
If you watch sport on TV, who knows, you might produce the next Dhoni.
Okay.
And even Kartike, this young boy from Jhansi, tells me that he watched cricket on TV and decided कि मुझे cricketer बनना है. So I think television, and whether it's in Kabaddi or cricket, has done a remarkable job in uniting India.
The reason I'm not saying much about the Pro Kabaddi League or the making of Kabaddi and so on and so forth is, I just thought this, by the way, Shubha. You
write a book.
Thank you. Not only that, but maybe I will write that, but the 7th edition of the Mysuru Lit Fest. Maybe I can come back and talk about Kabaddi, huh? What do you know? Thank you. We'll come back, not now. But I will say this, that they talk about football and rugby. Football, both are great sports. That football is a game of gentlemen played by hooligans. And rugby is a game of hooligans, well, not quite, played by gentlemen. Such is the difference in the demeanor, the behavior of the players. And I will say this for Kabaddi, and I'm generalizing because every barrel will have one odd apple that, is possibly a little rotten. But it's remarkable how Kabaddi players are so tough and so, not rough, but just so athletic and so robust and so physical and so potentially violent on the Kabaddi court. But off that, they're like lambs. They're really wonderful people to deal with. So it's a strange kind of dichotomy, but it's a wonderful discovery. Okay, so we need to do work.
Thank you very much.
We're presuming there are no questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Or
the Q&A will be moved to the author's lounge area, the signing area. So what a scintillating discussion this was. There are so many takeaways for us today. And I think the most important one was when you told us about Kohli losing his father on his first day and going back to play. Yes, it is an aspirational society in the world, the best aspirational society. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank the panelists on behalf of the Mysuru Literature Festival and the audience for such a wonderful discussion today. The books are being sold outside, and there is a designated signing area. Please do meet